moving back to Blinky, because you and I know where that name comes from, and the international people won't know where that name comes from. Hello and welcome to Getting Tabled. I'm Jason the Bruce, and today we have something a little bit different with you because I don't have George, I don't have Captain Major Socks. I do, however, have the game designer behind Platypus Industries, which is Matthew.
Hi, Bruce.
For your context, because I know that you don't have any context for that, both myself and Major Socks are both Jasons, so we had to, at some point, identify how to tell us apart, and I got called Bruce because I'm from Australia, and the old Monty Python sketch where everybody is Bruce.
Oh, no, I've got a good one. There used to be a lot of Matthews involved in the platypus thing. There used to be three of us,
Yeah.
and we had only four of us at that time, and the other one was James, and every time we went to a convention, it was Matt, and not Matt was the name tag.
I like that. That's good.
Oh, yeah, emails was a nightmare, so we just no more of that.
No. Well, it's just you now, so that makes things a little bit easier, I suppose.
Yes. Some ways, yeah.
Apart from having to do everything. So, we covered your game, Dropbears, which is not hit Kickstarter yet. It's coming out soon. But we kind of wanted to have a bit of a chat about where you actually came from. Now, I know you said some of this to me already, but
Yep.
you want to kind of touch on what brought you into the hobby?
Yeah, many moons ago. I am a long life gamer. I am 30 years veteran in gaming now. Started at the young age of 8 with Hero Quest. And was a tabletop gamer most of my life with the Games Workshop Rangers. I've owned a hobby store for a few years. I ran one of the gaming clubs in my area for 10 years. I love gaming inside and out. I will always be part of the gaming industry in some way, shape, or form. So I'm very excited to be at the stage where I'm at now, where I'm an independent publisher and get to be in the industry on a different level again, and get to learn even more and meet more different people. And it's always exciting. I love doing it.
Yeah. Do you remember the point where you kind of wanted to experiment with your own thing? Did it kind of come on the tabletop with kind of making your own armies and stuff, or making your own missions and stuff, or...
Yeah, it sort of starts with that sort of thing. It's almost like when Magic the Gathering players and everything, you start understanding the rules and mechanics of a game, I guess. And when you start getting to see the insides of it, how a game functions, you're always sitting there going, oh, well, what if we tweak this? What if we tweak that? And once you start down that path, it's a dangerous way of getting yourself into game design and never getting out again.
I think there'd be a few people that could probably relate to that.
Definitely, and it's some people are able to stop themselves and still just tinker with things around the house with home rules and things, which are not a bad thing either.
No.
Other people get out of control and design their own games, and other people take it even further and start releasing published games.
Which for you started with Ratcatcher.
Yeah, the exciting solo title was the first title that was released, not the first designed, but was an amazing learning experience, and it's been an amazing product, and it's just been more than I could have hoped for, really.
I mean, as for the experience, we'll come back to that in a second. I want to start on the timing of when that was launched. Because
During the pandemic.
April 14th is weeks from when that started, and when, in my head at least, it's still in that kind of, this is only going to be a few months and then it'll be fine. Because it's so early. How long was Ratcatcher before you got to that point? Obviously, you'd been working on it before then.
Yeah, like most titles, I think Ratcatcher's about a year and a half. I think I covered in one of the updates. I went back and sort of went through history with all the backers and showed them, the original sketches and the original prototypes that were on the table. I think there was dates all over those as well, and I keep dates in all my journals. But I think it's about a year and a half lead up to the actual Kickstarter campaign. And then post Kickstarter campaign, it usually takes you about 9 to 12 months to actually get it into the backers' hands anyway. And that was without a pandemic that kicked in and slowed a few things down. But I'm very lucky to have the partners I work with manufacturing and shipping and with a few of the other elements of delivery that made the process relatively painless, thankfully, and pretty slipstream through the whole process.
Yeah. I mean, what we know now, of course, which you couldn't have known then, was solo play games kind of became the new hotness at that stage because everybody's stuck at home by themselves.
They were sort of working their way up anyway. Like, Ratcatcher, before it went to Kickstarter, was part of a competition on the Game Crafter. They did a solo competition, and it came out as one of the runner-ups, one of the
Nice.
finalists in that. And at the time, I'd been just getting into solo games as well. There'd been a few titles that had really caught my eye, and due to my circumstances at home as well, I do play a lot of solo games, and I really do enjoy them because I'd much rather sit and play with dice and miniatures and cards and all that sort of stuff than to play most computer games because it's just the way I am, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, video
Um,
games kind of spoilt people for a long time. And if you wanted to play board games for a long time, it kind of felt like you were stuck with solitaire. I mean, I'm sure we
yeah.
weren't, but it felt like...
Or it
Or
was
you
that
had to
really,
pretend to be different people.
or it was a really skeptical thing of you're lonely.
Yeah.
There's always a real dogma around solo gaming, even with some of the designs that were around. It's always, even amongst the pretty open gaming community, it was always regarded as a bit of a shadowland of
Yeah.
you're a lonely gamer. But now solo games are far more accepted, and it is something nice that you can sit around. I know a few guys who enjoy a drink and a nibble while they do it at their own pace, and it's
Yeah,
also
why
nice
not?
and quiet for us parents as well. Like most of the time, most people are asleep when you're home from work, and it's nice to just be able to quietly sit down at your own pace. And the great thing is you can just walk away from it if you need to go do something, and then come back, and it hasn't changed, and there's no pressure to be anywhere or do anything that's not at your pace.
Yeah. Which is definitely helpful. And you can't really do that with a group game because, look,
No.
we're playing the game now, you need to be dedicated. And, look, can you put your phone down, please? And,
Yeah, you're taking too long.
yeah,
Come on, quick turn's a good turn. Yeah.
pretty much. I mean, there are some games that make it very impossible to have that quick turn, but,
Oh yeah, there's some gamers who make that impossible to have that quick turn.
well, we are all that person at some point. Whether we want to admit it's another question.
Yeah, trip that one.
Um, with Ratcatcher,
Yep.
now I know because from our conversations, a lot of what you've been doing has kind of been solo, and you've had to teach yourself how to do certain things and so on. Any particular elements of this that you found more difficult? I mean, you've got rat meeples or rat pulse.
Rapples.
Yeah.
I'm
Um,
very lucky. I'm a multi-skilled person from before this as well. I'm a qualified graphic designer.
yep.
I can illustrate and things like that. So a lot of those elements were really fun to do, actually. This is the first time I'd really illustrated something to this degree. And the illustrations you see in the game were originally designed just to be concept.
Yep.
But during playtesting and things like that, people loved them so much that I experimented with the new cover that I'd done and things like that. And again, people loved it as well. So I'm like, okay, well, easy way, let's save some money. Like, easier,
Yep.
no illustrator, I'll do it. Save a bit of money on that. So
Well, if it's
that's,
already getting the attention you needed, then
yeah,
why
exactly. And
redesign the wheel?
I'm a one-man band. This game was my first title. So doing anything that could save a little bit of money to make sure the project was more and more viable each time you could save a bit of cash with
Yeah.
less risk was anything I could do. I learned to do so much stuff just because of that rule. It was just learn to do it yourself, save some money.
Yeah. Pretty much. Um, Now that's been and gone. Obviously, it's out there in the wild now, and people are out there breaking the game and doing things with it that you could never have possibly thought of.
Oh, you can never think of it all.
No, it's not possible. Um, what did you learn from your first Kickstarter experience? It's never an easy thing, obviously.
It's a full-time job. It's like 30 days of like having a full-time job on top of whatever else you're doing at the time. Thankfully, I've been a backer for a very long time, so I've seen a lot of the pitfalls that you could easily get yourself into. So the first thing was trying to make sure that none of that happened. It was
Yeah.
good, consistent communication, clear goals, making sure everything was open. There was nothing hidden or anything along the way. Having everything pre-planned. A lot of it, like having full quotes for everything. We'd already booked, pre-booked freight. We'd already had samples made with the manufacturer, all this sort of stuff. So there was a
Yeah.
lot less unknowns, which made it easier because I could spend more time with the backers and with the campaign, without having to worry. And when people had questions about those sort of things, I could give them honest answers because I had thought of it. We've done it. We've tested it.
Or at the
Um,
very least, go, good question, I'll get back to you. And then actually get
yeah,
back to them.
yeah, exactly. And it sounds like a really simple thing, but how many of us have backed campaigns where that just doesn't happen?
Yeah, yeah.
And it really isn't a complex thing, it's just to answer the questions honestly. And sometimes admit, I don't know. Like,
And
that is not a sin to say.
no, and it's probably the hardest thing to say to some extent. I mean, I get asked questions that I don't know the answer to all the time. I mean,
Mm.
I don't play everything. I feel like I play everything sometimes. I own more
Oh,
games than
it's
I
even
play.
worse when it's your game because everyone just expects you to be like the be all and end all. The problem
Yeah.
is you have the opposite. You have all the iterations of that game in your head.
And you got to remember
And
which
so
one's
it's,
the
it's
current
pretty
one.
much like playing 10 games that are really, really similar, but there's some really key variants that if you went one way, they'd be different.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult. Someone goes, this, and you're like, oh, that, no, hold on, it doesn't work that way. It works this way.
Yeah.
And I'll refer to the rule book just as much as backers will sometimes.
Well, why not? I mean, it's
What
got
it's there
changed that
for.
many times. And yeah, that too.
No, rule books never change. It's going to be re-edited and re-put together for second edition printing anyway.
Yeah.
So,
When's that
and
happening?
that's because of feedback.
Yep.
Like tons of great feedback. Some of the backers have just been amazing. Like going through the whole rulebook, like even more hardcore than I could of pulling diagrams and reorganizing the rulebook into a fan made one on Board Game Geek. And
Yep.
it's just really nicely put together and it makes a lot of sense. And they've found gaps in the rules or ambiguities and things. And yeah, like it's with all those minds and all those hands working on it. There's no way I can compete with that.
No, because you're one person and they are, well, at least hundreds.
Yeah, and at least they can talk about it with each other as well. Like they'd argue over points and refine things through that sort of thing. And that they've played collectively. They can play more games than I could ever play in testing.
Yeah. Well, you've
And
got
that can
two and
be
a
in the
half thousand people that backed it, so
yeah, and that can be in the first few weeks. Like they can play more games in that first week than you could in like years of play testing. It's just nuts. The data you get just swamped with.
can you remember any particular questions that like really caught you off guard at all?
No. That really stands out, I guess. There's nothing that
Yeah. No, I was just
besides some of the
curious.
places in the world where people go, "Oh, I want it shipped here," and you're like, "You live where?" I didn't even know people there were really into board games, but apparently you are.
Well, apparently
So,
there's places in the world that it's really hard to post things to as well, so
there is definitely black zones they get referred to as. Yeah, there's a
yeah.
few of them around. But some of the new shipping companies, we're working with a new shipping partner for Dropbears, and they're opening up Russia, for example, which has always been regarded as a bit of a black zone.
Yeah.
Will hopefully be reopened as something that will just be regular parts of Kickstarter campaigns.
That
That's
would be
exciting.
really good.
Mm.
Because it's
Yeah,
there's
like
it's not a small amount of people that live there.
no, trying to find a publisher to work with in those areas is generally a better idea anyway. They know their crowd, and the translations are usually really important.
Yes. Yeah, that would make sense. Especially
Because
with the
trying to
amount of
find
dialects that there would be.
it's trying to find specialized translators because it's not just translating A to A, game terminology and the way a game turn works and things like that has to be explained in a certain way, or you aren't going to be able to carry out the action or
Yeah.
rule that's required. So I'm lucky.
If you've ever gone onto Google and tried to translate something to Mandarin or
Exactly.
Japanese and then back again, there's some because not everybody has their sentences even in the same order.
Nope. And there's not always a word for things as well. I
True.
work with a German editor, and the word token is problematic
Oh, okay.
because in German there's multiple words that can do the same thing, and so
Uh,
token is very ambiguous to them. Where we use token, and it could be a meeple, it could be a flat token, it can be
But
all
it's
sorts
not
of tokens. We
specific
just
enough.
accept that it's that description of it. For them, yeah, it's not enough.
Yeah. I could see that from that area of the world. That kind of makes a little bit of sense to me.
Oh, it's been great working with my German editor. They're just so fastidious about things, and that's definitely one of my weak points. So it's been good to have someone perch up and help me
You
out with
can't be
that.
good at everything.
No, and I'm happy to admit that there is definitely problems that need solving by someone else's brain and not mine, but it also frees mine up to do what I am good at. And so that's more the exciting thing because that gets me excited and keeps me passionate and drives me to keep doing the ridiculous thing that I do.
And passion is the hardest bit to keep going sometimes, I
That and
suspect.
energy levels, yeah.
Yeah. Still staying on Ratcatcher, but I want to move across to a website that we spoke about very briefly a minute ago. Off off the record. And I want to have a look at Board Game Geek. Because we touched on the fact that this is your first game.
Yep.
The first game that you'd ever published. And you've managed to get a rating of 7.2.
Yes.
Like, that's...
Very exciting.
I mean, 7.2... I mean, it's not a 10, obviously, but you don't want a 10 anyway. Well,
I
you do,
would
but
say
you don't.
no.
No, but if you've got a 10, then you can't do any better. And then when you do better, clearly that proves that the 10 was wrong.
Doesn't matter. I'll keep taking the next 10 and the next 10. Like, it's okay. I can deal with that.
And I mean, 7.2 for, like, literally the first thing you've ever done, I think is something
Yeah,
that's worth actually celebrating.
it's been exciting. I think being such a veteran gamer has helped me so much because I know what I've loved and hated in a really wide genre of games. And looked at it more than just the game, the product part of it, and the environment that it puts you in, and the theme. Everything has to gel together, and it makes the game a lot more work. But for me, that's what really sells a game. Like I really want to feel like I'm there. If a wizard can throw a fireball, he's got to be able to throw that fireball. Like, if you can run down the street and do something, I want you to be able to run down the street and do something. So
Yeah.
all those things are really important. And then adding fun little things into the game where there's a little bit of humor to break up the black, dark sort of world that Ratcatcher is with, blue glowing magic cheese and silly peculiar rats that are like mutated platypuses and dressed
Yeah,
up in stupid outfits and things like that. And then the next minute you're facing this terrifying nemesis who's no hold bars wanting to tear you apart. Like
quite
it's just
literally.
yeah, it's a lovely quirky combination that I think most gamers can really click with really quickly.
So why was the enemies rats? Did you just lose to Skaven one too many times, or...
No, the Ratcatcher theme came up a while ago. It was originally a kids game that was designed for Ratcatcher, but
Okay.
it's just nice and unique. It didn't I really spent a bit of time with my themes for the games. It's always looking for something that's just really piques my interest and goes, why hasn't someone done this before? Like it's
Yeah.
just a really cool little part of history, or it's a really cool topic, or something that just baffles me. That I'm like, why isn't there like 20 games like this? Why is there 30 million zombie games and not one about this cool like South American myth or something like that? It just baffles me that people don't go looking for something more unique.
And it's
Like I
not
want
like
someone
it's
to.
not like people don't know the story of the Pied Piper. It's a
Yeah,
fairly...
exactly.
I'm fairly sure it's... I wouldn't say universal, but I know that it's not even English to begin with. I think it's
It's
French.
German. No,
It's
it's
German,
German.
is it? Okay.
From the town of Hamlin. One of my backers is from Hamlin, and
Oh,
I
of course,
have
because that's where the Malifaux character comes from. Yeah.
a care package from Hamlin here with all the bookmarks and the story from Hamlin, and the
Nice.
store in Hamlin that sells Pied Piper stuff and things like that sells the Ratcatcher.
I kind of want to go to Hamlin now.
It's so cool. I was so excited. She took photos of there's a big Pied Piper statue in the center of Hamlin, and I've got a picture of my Pied Piper meeple sitting on the base of it with the rapples chasing him.
Nice.
It's one of my favorite photos. I think I have it on the Platypus Instagram somewhere. I think
I'll have to hunt it up.
it was just so beautiful to see that. I was so thankful that she took the extra time to just go out and do something that for her, I guess, would have been something so simple, but for me, on the other side of the world,
Yeah.
it's just absolutely phenomenal. I love it.
And, of course, the new hotness is going to be Dropbear. Now, for those that are not aware, the Dropbear is a vicious creature that's definitely 100% real.
The dark truth.
Yes, yes. I mean, people like to joke and tease, but it is a horrible thing that afflicts tourists every year. It's just
My
really
uncle's
devastating.
cousin's dog walker was eaten by a drop bear just 3 weeks ago.
He didn't have enough Vegemite. It's just you need to be
It
careful.
happens.
I
It's
know
just
not
part of
everybody
living
likes the
down under.
taste of Vegemite, but if it's going to save your life, you need to have some. Just
It's part of
behind
our
the ear.
diet for a good reason.
Why Dropbear? Other than the meme, obviously.
I love the mythos behind it, and just the idea that what if they were like, and for me, everyone took the cartoony side too much. I wanted to
Yeah.
see them as actual horror monsters. Like I wanted to see them as actually flesh-tearingly true. But it's no different to creating the Cthulhu mythos or like jackalopes and zombies and all those. None of those are real. But they're cool if we push them to that darker edge and make them a little bit more terrifying and the
Yeah.
scariness. But there was nothing in Australia done that way. I'm like, I'm an Australian designer. We should, as Australian designers, I've always felt that we really need to get ourselves out there and make games that are distinctly Australian.
There's. I know that Call of Cthulhu have a couple of expansions based here, but
Hmm.
even then, it's kind of its own thing to some extent. It doesn't really. I mean, the drop bear is obviously the one we're concentrating on here, and I know that you have some secrets. I may touch on them, and you may want to pretend that I didn't. Bunyip is also a common one
Yep.
that I feel gets lost in time to some extent.
Oh, that'd be a good one.
Although for me, was it that the Easter egg, or was it the other one that was the Easter egg?
The Yowies
The
and
Yowie is the other one I was trying to think of.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yowies are good as well. They're a bit too humanoid. I was looking at them recently and I was like,
yeah.
oh, they're like a big Bigfooty, and I was like, that'd be really hard to do without it just looking like a Bigfoot to someone if they walk past the box or something.
The problem with the Bunyip is there's so many different versions of the Bunyip, and
Yeah,
none
it
of them
is.
really
It's
look like an
true.
actual creature that really existed. It's all very much dream time.
I'm very lucky. Bunyip, the myth for the Bunyip's actually not far from here. It's
That
an origin.
helps.
Yeah, there's a little town called Bunyip where it originates, and it's probably about 10-15 minute drive from here. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they turn up at one stage because they're not hard to do a bit of research on them at least.
And I know the
And
hoop snakes are not in it because I already made the joke about hoop snakes and you shook your head
yeah, a
at me.
few of the, especially the northerners, keep asking me about hoop snakes. I'm a bit more southerner, so the hoop snakes don't get such a mention down here.
I mean, the problem with hoop snakes in this game is there's no hills. So you're not going to be able to
Yeah.
stand on top of the hill to avoid it.
Oh, you could definitely put hills in there. But I
Um,
love things like even things that aren't mythological, as like the cassowary,
oh, yeah.
like the murder bird itself.
The literal raptor that still
Yeah,
exists
the
to this
Australian
day.
velociraptor that like the feathered little sucker that will happily tear someone's head off. Just a
And for
look
those
in
that are
their eye.
wondering, no, the cassowary is actually a real thing. Not we're joking
Oh
about it
yeah,
being real.
too real sometimes.
It's terrifying.
And then there's actually one of the mythos that I want to explore, which is from the northern end of town, which is some of the darker human sides of our Australian side up north. So that'd be
Okay,
probably the third of the expansions, which I'm
nice.
excited because the way the series works means the mechanics need to flow through. So they are touched on. There is a little bit of development in each of them to make sure that that core mechanic can work in those different situations because they are going to be very different games.
Yeah.
So even if someone, doesn't like drop bears down the line because of whatever the gameplay is, they may find that, game two or game three may be more to their liking because it will be a different style, but there will be stuff that will be able to be used across them if they like.
Moving across from the rectangular board to the hexagonal, did you find any huge challenges there?
It was actually a lot easier. Dropbear is actually older design wise than Ratcatcher.
Interesting.
So it was actually the opposite way around. And that I guess they're just utilized differently. Like there's a different reason. If you use a square tile, there'd be less options, and the campers need to feel lost and like they really are struggling to navigate this bush in the dark. So giving them less options to choose from made it more like they could make directional choices more crisply and easily,
Yeah.
and it felt mechanical. Like it makes sense in mining games and dungeon crawlers and things like that because everything's human and structured. But in the bush, it's not. You really don't know exactly where you're going, and to go around things is a bit harder.
Yeah.
Which is really cool because in a square game, moving around something doesn't take as much action as moving hexagonally around something.
Yeah, that I can see where you're coming from with that. It adds complication to going off the path, and that's not a bad
Yes.
thing from a game mechanic.
No, and most of the time you would avoid that sort of complexity in a design because you want players to have more control directionally, and so movement wasn't so complicated. But in this case, we wanted movement to be something that was risky, something that was dangerous, because the bush itself is an enemy to you. Like there is dangerous terrain, there is dangerous animals around. So even just moving around, the campers can struggle. We wanted that to come across in just even placing the tiles.
Yeah. So this particular game is designed as a survival game.
Yep.
Obviously there is survival games out there already.
Yeah.
Um, any particular things that inspired you on that side of things? Beside local lore, obviously.
I guess it was just the theme that drove that. Like it
Yeah.
was, and to try and avoid a combat mechanism. There's so many of the games where you have Kryptos creatures and monsters and things like that, which is just a really blatant. Let's get a shotgun, let's get a chainsaw, and like battle these monsters up, which just didn't feel very Australian to me. Like we don't have those sort of weapons as a cultural thing. And it also, for me, takes the game from being an action adventure to a true horror game. In
Yeah.
a true horror, the hero doesn't have the ability to fight the monster; they must survive. So that was sort of a rule going forward: is that you are surviving, you are not fighting, and so there is no combat mechanics to actually fight the drop bears.
And what comes first for you? Is it the theme and then figuring out what connects to it, or is it more the mechanics side of things?
Theme. I'm definitely a theme designer first,
Yeah.
and almost like a bit Eric Lang as well, where I want to get that emotional feeling and content out of it as well. I want you to feel like, do you want the players to feel scared? Do you want them to feel triumphant when they do certain things? Like those emotions throughout the game are really important. And drive, I guess the theme then can drive those, and then those can drive the mechanics.
Yeah. No, I can see that. I can see that. Um, anything in particular that came out of your first campaign that you feel is going to help you with the second one?
That I've done it before.
Well, yeah,
One of the big ones is it's the boring part of it all, but budgeting it all.
yeah,
Like actually structuring the finances, doing a lot of the predictive financings for it, because you're sitting there going, okay, here's all the quotes, here's the Kickstarter, and then actually manufacturing is gonna and freight and everything's gonna be a fair way in the future. So
yeah.
there is gonna be changes through
Especially when
that.
things like that are well up in the air at the moment.
Yeah, but they always are. That's what you quickly learn is, the price of paper can change overnight.
Yeah,
The freight costs are always varying. I mean, at the moment it's more extreme, yes. But I think backers and gamers in general are going to have to get used to games getting far more expensive over the next year, 2 years. We've seen a little bit of it coming through, but it's going to be something that you'll notice more because that stuff will then flow onto the shelves. At the
yeah.
moment, you're still seeing stuff on the shelves that's been in Australia for a while or been in America for a little while, and so it's still pre-freight expense. But now, yeah, I was really disappointed when I got to figuring out the recommended retail for drop bears and realized how much higher it had been just from freight.
Yeah.
Like just the freight component itself added something close to 20% to the
Yeah.
MSRP. Like that's not something you were used to. Like in Ratcatcher, it was almost negligible. You just go, oh yeah, you just throw this sort of money at it and it'll be fine. And it was. We were very lucky to just get in just before a lot of the big freight rises,
Yeah.
and have all our stuff pre-booked, so that wasn't an issue.
Which definitely helps, especially
Yes.
with market being the way it is right now.
It's something if you're running a Kickstarter and you haven't talked to your freight companies and keep talking with them and build those relationships and constantly keep on the ground with information about what's happening to it, you're going in super blind.
Yeah.
Like I would hate to think what it would be like running a campaign of my scale and how much has been invested into the project already and not being aware of the cost that's going to come out of your unit. As I said, about 20%. If you hadn't predicted that in your costs and then finish your Kickstarter, make your product and try to put it on a boat, and realize how much of a huge chunk of money you're now having to sink into that boat that you're not going to be recouping or haven't already.
And at that point, it's really hard to get more money out of the backers because they've already invested what they can, and they
It
bought
is
all the
it's a
extra
very
things
tricky
because they were
predicament.
told one thing or another. And
It is a very tricky predicament. Some companies didn't have a choice. That it was something that did just happen
yeah,
to them, and it was unpredictable.
yeah, and it has
Others,
been definitely.
all the major guys, yeah, I'd say that. A lot of the little guys, I would sadly blame them on not being educated enough or not keeping in touch with their freight managers or leaving that till afterwards, going, oh, that's something you do afterwards once you know your numbers and everything. No, you do that previously. Your freight companies know how to work with those variable numbers. They will ask you the right questions. And if you don't know the answers, they're like, that's okay. You now have questions to ask your manufacturer. You now have questions to ask yourself
Yeah,
about
and to be
packaging
fair,
sizes.
if it was that easy, you wouldn't have freight companies that made the money that they do.
No,
Like you don't make that sort of money because you tell people things are hard. I mean,
no.
I'm sure that they obviously do very well for themselves, but at the same time, there's a reason for it because they don't really have a lot of choice. You can't get something shipped from China without their help, for
No.
example.
You can do them yourself. It's something that if a very numbers-based person and very keen on doing it yourself, it is a viability to do it yourself. It is definitely not in my wheelhouse of skills.
The amount of
Um,
time that it would cost you, though, surely
but if you don't have the
the
skills
cost of the
elsewhere, like
time. Yeah, well, yeah,
you,
true.
you've got to. We're not millionaires in the game publishing industry. You do have to draw a line and go, okay, well, if I can't do my own art, or if I can't do my own, videos, or I can't do my own this or that, then you've got to start saving money elsewhere. Then,
Yeah, that's
and
fair.
if you're going to run your own freight, maybe that could save you some money.
Obviously, the Simons and the games workshops and everything of the world have giant teams that can have people that are skilled everywhere, but the general smaller people, I mean, this
Yeah,
is
one to
moving
throw.
back into the miniatures world, but TT Combat is a company I know of that still have, I think it's even still less than 20 people working for them. And they
I
have
mean,
4 genuinely good popular games out.
yeah. I mean, I know of a lot of publishers who are less than 5 people.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say any of those people, like if you're looking for skills that you're going to hire into a smaller publisher, having a freight expert's not really high up that priority list. There'd be a lot of different specialists you'd be bringing in before those guys. So
It's
there's
just
got to be
easier
someone
to
who's
get them to do
going,
it.
I either have to utilize new skills and learn new stuff and do this on the fly, or are we going to fork out a little bit more money and bring a specialist in to do this?
Yeah. Kickstarter wise, do you know roughly beyond quarter 1 when it's going to be at this stage? I'm not asking for a date, but do you know roughly when it's going to be?
Utilizing everything I have at the moment, we're looking at mid-March.
That seems good.
We're just waiting for Chinese New Year to finish to pin some prototypes into place and things.
Yep.
Then we'll be able to predict shipping to all the reviewers and everybody because they're the last really big um, thing that needs to be done for the Kickstarter page. The Kickstarter page is being constructed already.
Yep.
Um, we'll be starting advertising really soon as well. We're working with Pledge Manager for this one as well. So they're bringing in some of their specialties to take a little bit of pressure off my shoulders. Because as cool as it is to be a little bit more successful the second time round, I am a one-man band and I'm trying to put as much in place previously and during the campaign so I can still spend the same amount of time I did in the first campaign answering questions and being there and being really present for the Kickstarter campaign. So I'm trying to find things that really sucked time away from me last time and things that we can maybe do a bit better. So I've got a few new things that I'm doing with that I've invested in, I guess, to try and make everything a little bit cooler, a little bit better this time.
Yeah.
Because we've definitely got like Dropbears is bigger as a campaign as well. Ratcatcher was quite humble as one single little box to
Yeah.
Dropbears. Gonna have a few friends.
The actual Dropbear miniatures,
Hmm.
are they going to be resin or plastic or they
Plastic.
resin? A plastic? Yep.
This is one of the resin 3-ups. So this guy is 300% the scale of what the one in the box will actually be.
Yep.
He's printed right here at Platypus HQ. Koala
Very
butt.
nice.
There's a nice in joke between me and the sculptor about koala butts. Took us a while to get the butt shape right, and so I kept making him Google koala butts, and he says he's never going to forgive me for having koala butt in his Google search. So this is one of the other guys as well. I'll try and find. Do I have the 1-to-1 scale ones? I don't have the 1-to-1 scales with me.
That's
Oh,
all
yeah,
right.
these guys are the huge ones, but you can see the nice detail, including it gets really hands-on.
And he's actually taken a bit of damage too, which I quite like.
Yes, this is Scar. So each of the drop bears has his own little name that's been given by the locals.
Yep.
Scar is the badass alpha who doesn't take nonsense and rules the roost in this area,
Nice.
as far as he is aware.
Hints of things
Um,
to come potentially.
yes, there's some really cool stuff coming. We've had 7 sculpts made.
Yep.
You will see 3 at the beginning of the campaign to let you know.
I think we've seen 3 in the pictures. No, because
Yeah, you'll
Scar
see
wasn't in the
3.
pictures that I've got.
Yeah, Scar. You'll see in all the main pictures. You'll get to see Scar. You'll see Mongrel, and you'll see Blinky. So Blinky was
Blinky.
the first guy I showed you, and I've got Mongrel, who's everyone's favorite. Everyone loves Mongrel.
Yeah, that's the one that I was familiar with. Did was it Plinky or Blinky?
Blinky, as in
It
Blinky
is.
Bill.
Yeah, I knew that that's where it was coming from. I just wasn't sure if that's what it was.
So yeah, to give you an idea, this is normal size Blinky. Oh, this is normal size Mongrel. This was epic size Mongrel.
Nice.
The help that having the 3D printer here has made to making the miniatures just as good as they can be has been phenomenal to be able to print them out, actually turn them over, use them in the games, and like really nut out a few little annoying things like are they just high enough that they knock a token over when they turn or when they're placed.
Yep.
So things like that won't happen either. Like, they're really cool how they work like that, or even just how they're positioned. Like when Mongrel's like launching at a camper, he's like right at head height, so he does actually look like he's lunging forward.
Yeah.
And we made sure all the detail comes across in the 28 mils as well.
And of course, with 3D sculpts, and especially with the one where his mongrel's launching out, you've obviously got to make sure that he's not going to be top heavy as well.
Yeah, exactly. That took a while to get that just right as well because we don't want too much excess weight because all it does is add to the miniature and all sorts of different
Yeah.
unnecessary weights and unnecessary materials and all this sort of jazz. So it's a really careful balance where you don't want it just chunky and ridiculous and it stops that beautiful flight motion that he's got as well. You detract
Yeah.
because he's launching from this big chunky gum tree that's 10 times his high.
Moving back to Blinky, because you and I know where that name comes from, and the international people won't know where that name comes from. So do you want to explain where that comes from?
So Blinky Bill is a cartoon koala that most Australian kids, especially I'm guessing you're my age, Jason,
Yeah.
definitely grew up with Blinky Bill on the TV in the morning. And he's this really like Winnie the Pooh sort of happy-go-lucky character rather than anything dark that he's now become in the game of Drop Bears.
So you get an idea of why I'm laughing at the fact that he's called it Blinky,
Yeah, and why
because
we're
you've
sticking our
corrupted
heads
something
on
very
yeah.
innocent, and I love it.
We almost had the idea of putting like a pair of like torn up Dundaloons like under his hand as well, just to really ram that home. But
Yeah.
torn clothes and things like that can be really tricky to get to be distinctly a certain object,
Yeah.
and they add a lot of like noise to the sculpt as well, which is a bit annoying. But we'll just have to use our imagination. Maybe a bit of green stuff for those at home who want to get creative.
Well, why not? Why not? Oh, I love that. I love that you're making little nods, not just to the lore, but also things that are vaguely connected to it. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
connection to Blinky Bill and the Drop Bear at all, but the fact that you found one is amazing.
But I wanted to make it Australian without it being kangaroos and emus. Like
Yeah.
so many people know Australia for those things, but they don't know about all the really fun things that make us like Australian and really unique. So a lot of the items that the campers find through it, a lot of them are common ones. You'll find a torch, you'll find a flare, you'll find those sort of things. But you might find lamingtons or
Lamingtons I like,
a
yeah.
billy can and stuff like that Australians will give a little bit of a chuckle out, but hopefully someone who's not from Australia might get on Google and like search up a little bit of Australian lore and find out why that's so important, or what's important about that for an Australian, or what it even is.
Yeah.
It might be something totally new, which is the whole point of creating stuff that's like entrenched within our culture, to try and introduce that to more people. Like,
Yeah. Or even our own people that don't really know because all they've ever paid attention to is probably American TV, to be fair.
yeah, we should be proud of some of the funny little quirky things that we do as Australians, and funny little stories. You almost forget that we have these that other people don't know, because you spend so much time on this little island only talking to other Australians,
Yeah.
and you forget that you really should appreciate some of these tales and some of these silly little things that really make us down under and weird, while we all been trapped on the island and not allowed to play with the other people.
That's because the spiders and the snakes protect us.
Oh, but I like the spiders. They're fun to ride.
Yes, very true. Because that's the thing that everybody doesn't realise. Yes, we have all of these things, and we tell you about them to make sure you never come and visit.
Yep. It's my island.
You can't come. Especially if you're from Tasmania. You're not allowed to visit Tasmania.
Oh, no. Not the family island.
That's actually where I'm from originally.
Oh, that
So I'm
explains
allowed
so
to make Tasmania jokes because that's where I'm from.
I don't know, I'm Territorian, so. None from the weirder end.
Very much so. Well, thank you very much, Matthew. Obviously,
Absolute pleasure.
when the game does hit Kickstarter, we will obviously be telling people about it. We know to keep an eye out around March at this stage. Anything in particular you want to give a shout out to, games-wise?
Well, make sure you go check Ratcatcher out if you're a solo, or you haven't tried solo games even. Like, get out there. There's so many really good solo titles out there, and you can get some as low as like $15. Like, you really can get some really great experiences that you can play on a lunch break at work even. You can like just get off a screen and really enjoy a game that's not super heavy, that you don't have to wait till games night to play. I definitely recommend more people get out there and try solo games out. And try smaller publishers. Find independent publishers. Those guys really need your help.
Yeah, no, definitely. I know Facebook.com/Platypus Industries. I assume it would be at Platypus Industries on Instagram.
Yep.
Anything else?
www.platypus.com.au.
Platypus?
Industries.com.au.
Platypus Industry. I was going to say that doesn't sound right. Because I was on that website like 3 seconds ago.
That's an easy one to find, even if you get it pretty spell wrong. Like, there's not much like it, thankfully.
Yeah. Platypus, Platypus.
Yep. Weird, like the animal.
Very much so. I love the fact... Interesting story before we finish. The person that discovered the platypus took it back to England and got accused of gluing pieces of an animal together.
Yep. They thought it was a hoax.
Yep. Same thing with our swan, because it's black and not white. They thought that he'd dyed it.
We did. Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, we just dyed the entire species. Long enough that it became inherent.
Yep, done. Only Australians would be silly enough to do something like that.
Well, I'm going to put an end to it there. Thank you very much. And check things out. Thank you very much for checking out this video. If you're enjoying the content of this channel, please like and subscribe. If you're in a position to do so, please check out patreon.com/gettingtabled. You receive early access to at least 80% of all videos that we put out, and you get access to the video edition of all of our podcasts the day that they're uploaded. If you'd like to check us out on social media, facebook.com/gettingtabled is the most active. We also have a Discord server. You can email our team at gettingtabled@gmail.com. If you're on either Twitter or Instagram, you can find us at gettingtabled. And until next time, play more games.